start by introducing ourselves. I'm Jill Munden, and I'm here with Fiona Anderson, and we're going to lead this session entitled Leading with Competitive Edge in Today's World. So just to give you a little bit of background about me, so I spent the early part of my career in the corporate environment as a senior manager, and then I've spent the last 20 plus years working externally across a broad range of sectors. And I think really just to summarize what my central theme, it's about working with leaders and their teams to look at what is the great culture that really enables people to thrive each and every day that they come into work. So I work one-to-one, I work with groups and managers and leaders, and that's what this session is all about. It's about leadership, but it's really focused in on today's world and what's required in today's world. And I'm really looking forward to having a participative session. We've got a lot to get through. However, with a smaller number of people, we can hopefully pull some input in from you guys too. Over to you, Fiona.
So hi everybody, Fiona Anderson. I'm a member of Engage for Success Steering Group and CIPD Local Committee. So a very active volunteer in the end. And my passion is absolutely working with people around behaviours and the whole culture topic, either with the whole organisation, departments or individuals, really focusing on behaviours and the impact that they have in the workplace, the impact they have on the bottom line of the business, which I don't think executives and leaders really appreciate the impact of poor engagement, poor company culture. So that's the area, helping people shine the light on the behaviours and where they can really help people to be their best at work, which is what we all hope for each day, isn't it? Thank you, Jill.
Great. So if you would like to introduce yourselves, it would be really great to know who we've got in the session today, and for you to introduce yourselves to each other. Do that in the chat. That would be great. Yeah, we'll crack on. This is part 2 of our workshops, and it is a joint CIPD and Engage for Success session. So Fiona and I decided to put this session together as we were seeing the huge challenges that leaders were experiencing in engaging and retaining employees in this candidate-driven market. So we wanted to take you through a process of thought to stimulate you to think about the priorities for leading in this new world. In our first session, we reflected upon VUCA cubed, or as we were calling it, but there is another term coined, which is called BANI. So we're in this context, which is hugely complex. And we are now seeing, and what we looked at in our first session is what employees have experienced over the last couple of years and how that has served to fundamentally change what employees are expecting of their employer. We did record that session, as Fiona just alluded to, and so we are going to put in the chat. In fact, Fiona has already done so, and you could, if you weren't on that call, you'd like to have a listen, there is a link in the chat, so you can grab that. So, and if anybody else who's listening to this wants to have that link, please just email Fiona or I separately. We'd be very happy to send that recording to you. So what are we going to look at today? So we're going to start with a summary of how the participants from our first workshop described their company culture pre-COVID, and then how they described what the culture needs to be in order to attract and retain people today, because this feeds in very nicely then to the 6 elements of leadership that Fiona and I have put together to enable an organisation to get that competitive edge. And we're going to finish off with some reflection time for you to consider what you can take away and then apply within your organisational context.
So we finished the last session by asking the question, which 3 single words describe your company culture pre-COVID? And we've had time to it's just, where did that word go to? Analyze it. Clearly needed to put my teeth in pressure today. And it was interesting for those of you who are involved in employee engagement, only a third of the responses, in other words, the words there on that Wordle, were positive. That meant that 2/3 of the comments that we had and the words to describe company were negative. And that really fits and reflects where employee engagement was at pre-COVID. So yeah, and in terms of productivity, and of course, since then, we've had 2 years of COVID, haven't we? So the 3 single words we then asked, what was the culture needed to attract and retain people now? And again, made some deeper analysis on that. And it's interesting to see that I would say at least 66% of the content there is all about employee engagement. 66%, with 16% in addition being about trust and 8% around clarity. So really emerging that shift in culture where 2/3 were disengaged and quite actively disengaged given the negativity. What have you been doing in your business to meet that shift in culture that's needed since COVID? What are you doing in your company? And more importantly, what are your leaders doing to role model the changes in culture that are needed? And of course, how aligned are your systems and processes then to embed a new culture going forward? Back to you, Jill.
So this is our model. So this is where Fiona and I have looked at the impact of the pandemic on today's world of work. But we've also taken into account the other context of leadership, which is understanding the changing profile of our employees in terms of generations. So in the working population, we now have people working alongside more generations working alongside each other than we've had before. So up to 5 generations in some cases. And 55 to 60% now of the workforce is from generations Y and Z. So that's the under 40s in terms of age. And they are bringing with them some fundamental differences in their priorities and expectations. So we have looked at this full picture when we've come up with, and we'd like to share in this model, these 6 things that we believe leaders need to be paying particular attention to be successful and productive as a leader, and ultimately maintaining that competitive edge. So just looking at the first element is purpose. And we are going to draw on some Gallup research to explain why we're starting with purpose. Gallup research evidences that there is a direct link between an employee's understanding of their organization's purpose and culture and measures of business health. So they then go on to show that across all industries, only 41% of employees strongly agree that they know what their company stands for and what makes it different from competitors. This is clearly an issue for business health. And among the US employee population, only 4 in 10 strongly agree with the statement, "The mission or purpose of my company makes me feel my job is important." And Gallup identified by moving that ratio to 8 in 10 instead of 4 in 10, organizations could realize a 41% reduction in absenteeism, a 50% drop in patient safety incidents, and 33% improvement in quality. So there's some fundamental business improvement measures that really show the importance of drawing this correlation with purpose in particular. And the other thing to bear in mind is obviously with generation Y and Zs in predominance in our workforce now, they are the generations that actually really prioritize purpose, and making a difference is really important to them. So that is why we've got purpose as our number one element.
So thanks, Jill. And so let's look at purpose. Why is purpose important? Well, purpose connects emotionally, really gets into the core of what's important about a business, and then for people ourselves. And certainly the younger generation are really looking for, how does this company fit with my life purpose? How does this company fit and help me achieve my life purpose? What is this company doing where I can contribute to my life purpose? So that absolute emotional and loyalty connection is so important going forward. And so we need to think about that shared purpose. One, as a business and as leaders, what's our role in that? How do we link that into people? How do we share that message to really encourage people to join in and be part of our business or buy our products? And what is it we're doing in the planet? Because guess what? That planet is jolly important out there, and nobody can forget that. So how are we as a business bringing people in through our shared purpose and that understanding of how we contribute to our local community and planet? Both of these create that emotional engagement, employee engagement, and increased productivity. Jill's just given us some great data from Gallup for that. So that all creates a better productivity, because guess what? I'm enjoying my job. It's really making a difference. And that productivity increases profit, not just for the company, but guess what? For us as employees, greater profit, larger salaries, one would hope. And the even bigger benefit for this, and we've identified this in our report that's on Engage for Success, if you'd like to see it, is that greater profit therefore provides more tax income into the public purse, therefore more money for us to be able to support the development, the growth, the impact that the whole world is having on our ability to be able to afford to live right now. Over to you, Jill, for a slide. Thank you. So let's have a look. I've chosen Pret as an example. Pret has got my loyalty. It's had it for years. It became a business when sandwiches were limp things wrapped in polythene. Do you remember those ghastly days and those soggy sandwiches? And the great thing is that they are very clear. They make freshly made food and good organic coffee. Can't complain at that, can you? Whilst also try to do the right thing. And those few words mean such a lot to the people in Pret itself. Next picture, please, or slide, please, thanks. And in terms of one area where that comes to life is they often have special offers in their shop where they will contribute 20 pence per sale for one of their charities, and their charities are normally homeless ones. So I know in buying that sandwich that I'm contributing to a charity at the same time, because 20 pence of that is going to a charity. I love the quality of the food. I love the consistency. I really enjoy the culture within there. So let's look at what it's like in the next slide, please, to what it's like living there, working there. So Pret treat their staff like family. In other words, they're looking for that family culture within the shop. They encourage them to interact. They encourage them to have fun. They know that they can teach people how to make sandwiches. What they can't do is teach people how to be passionate about their job. So they really attract in people who will work in the Pret way and will enjoy and get the most out of that for the customer experience and their own experience. And in their recruitment process is quite interesting. The last stage of recruitment process is invite you in to work in the shop for a day. And it's the team who vote to decide whether you are a member of their Pret family and right for their Pret family. Absolutely phenomenal. So really, so you can bring to your life. It's how do you bring your purpose to life? Next slide, please. Thanks, Jill. So in creating a shared purpose, one of the key questions is, well, why do we exist? That could be, why do we exist as a lead team? But why do we exist as a business? What is our purpose as a business? And what's our hope for the future? So these are questions you can use to help your leaders identify their purpose. What value do we bring and how do we communicate this? So important. How do we create and get that emotional engagement with our business, with our products, with our staff to attract and retain the right people for us at work? Thank you, Jill. So we're going to be looking now at values. Values underpin purpose. And I remember days gone by when values were just words on walls, and boy, did I want to rip them down. Values are becoming so much more important. Again, they connect emotionally. They are intangible and yet so important to understand what our brand values, what our company values are, because we can use them in our recruitment. We can understand how the values play out through behaviours and really be clear about, so what are the people that we're trying to attract into our organisation? So yes, please, next slide. Thanks, Jill. You could tell I'd moved on, couldn't you? So that you have that critical role in attracting and retaining talent for you. So if you don't have values, how do you find them? So let's give you a case study of one of our clients. Thank you, Jill. This is an organisation I was invited to. In fact, it's an HR department. And this what describes the culture within that business. Very easy to, and that was through one-to-one, through focus groups, etc. And in digging even deeper, I identified that actually a lot of this came from the leadership. The leadership were demonstrating very hierarchical unfairness, a lack of transparency, bullying, micromanagement and misrepresentation. So leadership behaviours in terms of driving a culture are absolutely fundamental. Now imagine stepping into that and trying to work in that environment and how difficult that would be. So a client example. So next slide, please, Jill. Luckily, in bringing me in, we were able to identify the values that they did. This is what they did want. So what are the behaviours? What are the values we need? What's the culture we need to be able to drive our strategic behaviours? So such a different picture where trust is really important, transparency, open communication. So almost the opposite, but with some real large messages coming through. Next slide, please. And working with them, that resulted in 4 values. These were the 4 values that were identified from the work we did. And they were involved in this. I brought in what I thought were the 4 values and they changed one of them to the wording that much better fitted for them. And I think that was a partnership one. So I'm going to focus on valued on the next slide. Thank you, Jill. Valued had 3 definitions, well, maybe even 4. It was about me being valued as a person. It was about the team I work in being valued. It was about the department that we work in being valued within the business. And most of all, it was about us adding value to the business. So valued as a value gave so many different dimensions and provided an outline in terms of the behavioural expectations. And that's really important. In identifying values, you then need to identify, so what are the behaviours that we expect as a result of this value? What are we looking for? What are our expectations around this? So the results, Jill, thank you. So this was the response. Their response to this question, we have the culture in HR to role model and succeed to deliver strategy increased by 70% in that piece of work by bringing in their new culture and helping them and involving them in creating that new culture. Jill, next slide, please. And so here is a technique in terms of how you review your values, the questions to ask, how to look forward so that you can almost temperature test whether you've got the right values and are they going to be valid. Who would have known in the COVID world what was going to be valid, eh? And how you prioritize and how you build that into your business. So values, absolutely key. And please make sure they're more than words on walls. They're absolutely role model and adopted through the leaders and their behaviours. Thank you, Jill.
So our third element in our model is leadership behaviours. And it's so interesting because Fiona and I, over the time that we've been working with leaders, have seen so many examples of leaders who put great purpose and values and define all of that. But that is all blown apart when it comes to them demonstrating those priorities through their own behaviours. And so I remember a particular company I was working with for a few years ago, where I was doing some focus groups, and one of their values was transparency. And the feedback I was consistently getting from staff was that people had all sorts of issues, but were really afraid of speaking up, as they'd seen the career limiting consequences that so many other people who had spoken up were experiencing. So there was understandably, there was a lot of cynicism about these focus groups, because they just didn't believe that anything would be done with the feedback, and that they might be found out, and their careers were potentially at risk. So we're going to spend some time looking at the behaviours we think are more important for leaders to be demonstrating in today's world. So competitive edge leadership is creating an environment or culture by modelling specific behaviours which align with your company values to stimulate behaviours in others in order to create performance and results. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with this section, which is about just thinking about what behaviours we want to see across the organisation. So this is the question: which are the behaviours that you and your employees want to see in your organisation that will bring your values to life and enable your business to thrive and grow? So these are the six. So Fiona and I have put together the 6 behaviours that we believe are really important in today's world. So after, if we take ownership is our first one, I would say that this is one of the themes that I've heard a lot about from my clients most recently, because they are so frustrated with the huge workloads that they have on their plate, being bombarded from every direction, and they're under a lot of pressure with the speed of change that is hitting them, and they just want people to be taking more ownership and being proactive in driving the business forward. And they're not seeing people do this. It's what I call the owner's mindset. And that's what you want people to have, imagining that it's their own business and what do they need to do. So they're going above and beyond just their role. And they're not sat there just reacting to being told what to do. So taking ownership is our number one. Number 2 is innovative. So in this non-linear world, we really need people to be stepping up to being more creative and thinking outside the box of the proven methods and ways of doing things. And by challenging the status quo and just never standing still, always thinking about what could be around the next corner. This is really critical for a competitive edge. Thirdly, we've got being open and honest. You know, we really want to see the transparency in culture, because actually when you've got a transparent, open and honest culture, then that really helps to feed the innovation. I've certainly witnessed people being afraid to share their thoughts and ideas for fear of making a mistake, because they don't want to be punished. They don't want their ideas to be ignored. And so the impact is that people will start to withdraw and disengage and just do what they're told to do and no more. So we really want to have that expansive, open and honest culture. The fourth behaviour is being inclusive and supportive of all. There is so much diversity in skills and experience that it is really important that we need to fully tap into the full potential of the resources that we have. We need people to be respectful of the difference and to look for opportunities to utilise it. We've seen lots of situations where people feel quite threatened because they are worrying about somebody else's strength showing up their weakness, for instance. You know, they need to see it as a positive and expand the scope of what their team can deliver by utilizing that difference and diversity. The fifth one is collaboration, being collaborative. And you know, I still hear so much about the silos that exist within organizational structures. So, you know, this is really limiting in terms of the information sharing and joining the dots. And so connection between people and a sense of belonging can be one of those really strong reasons why people stay within an organization. So creating that collaborative spirit and behavior is so important. And then finally, we've got flexible to adapt. So if there was one massive lesson that I think it has come out of the pandemic, it is this of the need to be agile. There are numerous examples of organizations who've made really brave and quick decisions despite the uncertainty that they faced to bring about some fundamental changes in their business. So when we think of personality types, there are some people who absolutely embrace change. It's just natural to them to love change, but there are other people who really struggle with it. So it's how can we really support everybody to be flexible and to reinforce the need to adapt and change. So those are the 6 behaviours that Fiona and I are putting out there. And so now the question is, which are the behaviours that you then need to stimulate, though, as a leader, and to be consistently modelling in order to see those behaviours within your teams and your workforce? And so what I'm going to go through, but I'm just curious, is anybody got any ideas? You know, if we're looking at these 6 behaviors, what are the kind of behaviors that you think you want to see leaders modeling in order to stimulate these? Do you want to pop some thoughts into the chat? I'm sorry, this is lunchtime. I'm just plonking a question at you when you're probably just enjoying having a little bit of downtime. So I'm happy to go on. Oh, we've got some ideas coming in. I like to see more human-focused behaviours that could sit as a subset of these. Empathy and compassion, Megan, thank you. I think trust is the foundation to everything, absolutely. Open and honest trust is absolutely critical. Being curious, fabulous, thank you. So if I'm just going to take you there, I've got loads to put on this slide. So, and I'm just going to go through just a few elements of it. So taking ownership, we want to really empower people. A coaching style as a leader is a really powerful way of empowering people and getting them to take ownership and creating accountability. This is the I literally last week I was with an organization and their leadership team, and I was just staggered to hear that they had actually gone and done an away day 3 months ago about a business priority, and they had really, they'd invested a lot of time and energy into this away day. And when I asked about the progress and the follow-up to that just last week, there was not a lot coming my way, and I was shocked. I was really shocked, because there's an example of a leadership team that is absolutely not modeling this within their own team, let alone across the organization. So, you know, creating that accountability is really important to keep people focused and on the job. So being innovative, how can a leader really encourage more of that? I think that's, you know, as Sarah said, being curious, listening, and challenging the status quo, making it clear that mistakes are there as an opportunity to learn, and avoiding judgment, all of those great things. Being open and honest. As a leader, I don't know whether you've seen the work of Brené Brown, but vulnerability is, from my point of view, she is an absolute guru in the art of being vulnerable as a leader. And I saw a really great example of that within a big PLC client of mine, where a new MD came in during COVID. And their very first big company town hall meeting, they had to do online. And they were extraordinary. It still sends shivers up and down my spine as I heard the feedback from different members of the company, because they told me how she had shared some really personal stuff that actually, you know, was a big risk for her. It was potentially really exposing for her, but she put it out there, and the feedback she got was absolutely incredible. And people then matched it. They then were pretty vulnerable with her and showed and exposed stuff of their own. And so it just started right from the word go. It was absolutely amazing. So that's a really great example in my mind. Inclusive and supportive of all. The biggest point here, I think, is valuing and respecting difference. And I think so many leaders over the years that I've worked with them haven't done that. Their tunnel vision and thinking that everybody's the same as them. And I'm talking generally here, but, you know, I have seen so many examples of leaders doing that, where they are just expecting everybody to be the same as them. And actually, I think them understanding that difference and respecting it and showing it through their behaviors is so important. Being collaborative. This is the intentional bit. I think now more than ever, it's so important for leaders to be really intentional about how they're sharing and communicating across teams. And then lastly, the flexible to adapt. I think the point in the emotional flexibility, that this was a great example during COVID times of how leaders needed to be real and open about what was impacting the business and saying it as it is. But obviously it was pretty bleak and grim for many people and many businesses. And so, you know, if a leader stood up in that situation and just said, oh, you know, it's all great, it's all going to be fine, nobody would believe them. So it's being real, but then balancing it with being inspirational about, you know, where they can see potential opportunities coming from, and giving people that hope. And so that emotional flexibility to be able to go to both those places, I think is really important. So that's our take on the leadership behaviours as we see them. And these are all the things that I think if leaders can be really focused on developing their modelling of these behaviours, it will be really paramount. And then the next thing around the leadership behaviours is, how do you ensure that this is consistently modelled? And I've sat with many a team of leaders talking about, they've done all this work on about defining what their behaviours are, but then it's okay, how are we going to keep each other accountable, and how do we observe and give each other feedback in a way that it lands, etc. So this is an important point alongside defining the right behaviours. So the fourth element that we've got in our model is the environment, which has changed massively over the last 2 years. So what do we mean by that? So how does the work environment evolve to meet the changing needs, promote your values, and support the desired behaviours? If we look over the last 50 years, huge changes from the 70s, where the office cubicle was important, to the 80s, where then suddenly the office, the open plan office came back. And then we had, in the noughties, we had the advent of hot desking. There's been so much change. In the last decade, we saw the creative office designs aimed at stimulating collaboration and the social and creative space. So there's been a lot of change. And so how would I summarize the change that we've got here today? So just before the pandemic, I would say that the office was very much seen as the sole vehicle to enable the performance of people, and it was measured. People were measured by input. So this was very much about the people being present in the office and at their desks, and there were only literally 5% of employees were working from home. So this was all really focused on the office. So now what we're seeing is that the office is just a part of the hybrid solution for engaging people to deliver outcomes. And that, to me, is the fundamental difference, is that it's all about outcomes, and it's about coming up with a solution that will enable people to satisfy their own needs, but to be able to at the same time satisfy the needs of the business. So whether that be them working part-time from home, sometimes in a coffee shop, sometimes in an office, but it's pulling it together as a solution that fits and meets the needs of both the business and the individual. So choice is the way I would summarize it. There is now a new focus on creating a choice in how, when, and where people get their work done. So what is it that you need to consider in your approach to engaging your people and facilitating their productivity through the environment? That is the question I will leave you with. I'm just going to go through just a few of the points that we would come up with in answer to that question. So firstly, involve. This is about engaging people. So we need to involve and get people's input in the design. Health and well-being is so essential to this in the fundamental design of work. I've seen numerous examples of, and I was with a client last week who was stressed through the roof. And when I asked him, what do you need to be at your best? He said one of the things was exercise. He knew was fundamental. He says, how can I do that when I'm leaving the house at 5:30 in the morning and not getting back till 7:30 at night, and I want to see my family? He just threw his hands up. I don't have any choices. And so what I believe is that employers need to be proactive in answering this question and making this central to the office design. Ensuring fairness is critical. So obviously there are frontline jobs where people need to be in certain locations in order to do their jobs. And so how can you offer them flexibility, maybe in when they're working. So it's not just about where they're working, so that there is deemed to be some fairness. The things to consider perhaps in your office design is the space to be a welcome change of scenery. You want it to be appealing, so that people really want to come away from the comfort of their home into the office. How do you incorporate independent and collaborative working? So that, and there's social space and there's creativity space that can really stimulate that creativity. And then there's also the need to be investing in VR and the latest hybrid technology to keep up to date and to really continually improve the efficiency of your meetings, when your hybrid meetings. Taking into account the homework space as well, recognizing the importance of that. There's some really interesting statistics around that. I think in one survey, 45% of people had received no equipment support or advice from their employer on home working. That's massive, and that really needs to change. Encouraging contribution to local communities is an amazing way of linking back into that purpose, as Fiona was talking about. And when you've got a hybrid work solution, this is so enabling in terms of the contribution to communities. And then the last thing is about the impact on the environment and the planet, and how your solution can contribute to the environment ultimately. And again, that links into where we started in our model. Okay, thank you, Fiona.
Thank you, Jo, well done. So we're now moving on to the fifth aspect, and that's the ways of working. So we'll have to go through this pretty quickly, I think. So in terms of the pandemic, it created so much shift, didn't it? Not just in our expectations, but in the way we do things and how we work. So what does this mean for us remaining productive or becoming more productive? We have used this model to help organizations understand, what did they do at the time of COVID breakout? How did they transform their business so quickly? I think pivot was the word, wasn't it? Boy, the change that was created, and I'm sure for many was an absolute nightmare, and yet for so many others it was so smooth at work. So what is it that we did then that we're not doing now and we need to bring forward? What are the things that we can learn from that? Great, we'll never get another opportunity like that to achieve such change in such pace. What is it that we can bring around in terms of our people, our process and our technology? So here's some hints and tips in terms of what you can do. Absolutely, that clarity, that day-to-day clarity, that week, that message, the communication in organizations just became really, really good in most places. And that's because of online. How can we bring in the employee voice? Where do we include them? How do we involve them? And the clarity of expectations. How can we meet up regularly with our individual staff and really help motivate them? How can leaders do that? What is it they need to be doing? How do they need to be demonstrating that one-to-one, that importance of that one-to-one catch-up and clarity? And what is it about personal growth, as Alistair was saying earlier on, that importance of personal growth and career aspirations? It's exactly what the younger generation are looking for. And we've got companies who are using weekly time. They're allocating weekly time for personal growth. We've been online with a travel company where they've put gamification in to attract people globally into their IT team, because guess what? They can recruit globally now. They don't have to rely on the UK for employees. So it's, how can we start doing things really differently that will help encourage people to be able to continue and to bring their best into workplace? What do our leaders need to be doing? Will it be a 36-hour week going forward? Who would have said we'd have all been working from home 2 years ago? Yeah, how many leaders were so against that? And yet nowadays it is part of the way we work. How quickly are you recruiting? What are you doing differently in your recruitment? How are you bringing your values and your purpose to life? How are you threading them through? Was working with a manufacturer a couple of months ago and helping them look at their recruitment and retention. Well, they were still asking for paper CVs. Who's going to apply with a paper CV? And they were using corporate photographs for a manufacturing organization on their web. So how do we bring all the systems and processes and methodologies together into really attracting and retaining the best people that we can attract into our business? And the one data there, sorry, Jill, that really stood out to me was hearing from my colleagues in CIPD, 20 to 40% were sharing they had no show on the first day or in the first week for new recruits. Imagine the cost and the bottom line in terms of recruitment costs if we are experiencing a 28 to 40% either no show on day one or we've lost them by the end of week one. What are we not doing? What do we need to be doing differently to really keep those people? We've got them there. One story was somebody who arrived in Birmingham, parked a car up, realised she had to pay for a car park, drove home again, never to be seen. Another was somebody arriving in Birmingham International, couldn't find her way, went home again. What are you doing to make it easy and to make people really want to come and work within your business? What are your leaders doing? Where are they investing? Where are they in terms of purpose and values? Thank you, Jill. So here's an idea. This is an idea for just do it occasionally through the year. Ask each team, so what's my productivity this week? Score myself between 1 and 10. What's the one thing I can do differently? Because guess what? I own my change. What's the one thing we as a team can collectively do differently? And what's the one thing my boss can do differently? How often do we ask that question? Yeah. So there's suggestions for really creating that environment and creating that way of working that works for your people and creates that talent pool that you need. So we're now going to go on to the sixth element, which is innovation. Where are we doing on time? Okay, so innovation, absolutely fundamental. I think we'll go on to the hints and tips, shall we, Jill? No, I haven't got hints and tips in that one. Yeah, psychological safety, shall we? We are really needing that agility in business. We need that collaboration. We need that safe environment. And here, if you haven't come across psychological safety, I suggest you have a look at it. This model helps us develop safety for people to be able to contribute, for them to feel included, to be able to learn, to be able to then contribute, and then to be able to challenge. Now, if we want innovation in any business, we need all of that. What are we doing in psychological safety? And Jill and I could do a day's workshop for you on that if you want. Such a wonderful topic. Another word for trust. Another word for trust. And yet such a really simple framework to work through with your team to really understand, well, how do we create this in our environment to remain and to become innovative and remain at that leading edge within our business. Thank you, Jill. So what do you need to happen to foster innovation in your working environment? So quick dipping our toes into innovation. Have a look at psychological safety, see how you could adapt that into your workplace and bring it into your leadership team. Have they got psychological safety? How's it working for them? Thank you, Jill.
So there we have our 6 different elements of competitive edge leadership. It's been a very whistle-top tour, but we believe these are the critical things for leaders to gain competitive edge. And as I said at the beginning of this session, this was really to provoke thought by taking you from considering the context and then what do we consider the priorities for leaders. So we hope you've got something from that. And the last question really is just for you to take a couple of minutes to think about, what are your key takeaways? Are there, maybe 2 or 3 things that we've talked through that have sparked an initial thought in your mind that you could then usefully use within your work, within the organization, and what do you need to do to actually make that happen? As from our point of view as coaches, we always like to challenge and to create that accountability. So if you want to, one of the things that we're offering is that if you want to have a half-hour consultation with us about the things that have come out of today's session that you want to really do something with, or indeed if you've got any questions or anything, because it has been a very quick paced session. If you want to use a half hour with Fiona and I, we would be delighted to give you that offer. We also are offering because we're doing a number of these sessions, we're offering to anybody that's interested in executive coaching a 20% discount. And when I say for anybody, we're talking about the first 2 people that come to us. We're very happy to put that offer out there. So that's Fiona and I. If you have got any questions, then please, just reach out. Fiona and I would be more than happy to help with anything. And I know that there's some requests. I know Sarah asked for the Gallup research. If anybody has anything else that they would like from us to follow up and support what we've talked about today, we'd be more than happy. Fiona, anything else from you?
I just want to say a huge thanks. If you would like to put what you are taking away in chat, Richard identified earlier on, he got a new job from what he learned. Oh, yay! We like to hear the impact that we have. So thank you ever so much. Looking forward to hearing what you're able to take away and implement. You've invested 1 hour of your time. Thank you very, very much. It was lovely to see you. And if you want the link to the video that this will create at some point, then again, give us your email address in chat. We don't have access to your email addresses or any contact details for you. So if you do want us to follow through on anything, please contact us or leave a message in chat. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
The competitive edge in your business.
Yes. Great to see you. Leave you to go back to the rain.
I'll take it off recording.